So we oddly talked about all reality shows. I'd like to throw in a scripted show because obviously there are still some good scripted shows on during summer. And Switch to Birth is one of them, which returned with its second half of its second season a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that I love about them is they move their story very quickly. And they're not afraid of taking chances either with style or with story. I mean, they did the all ASL episode, and they just did the what if episode, the alternate reality, what if Bae and Daphne what if their parents had found out about the switch when they were children, and how that would have changed who they became. And I have to be honest, first I was very surprised that the episode was done from John's perspective, because I think that definitely changed a lot of things. I mean, his fears of what could have been are very different from someone else's fears. And so that alone set up, a certain route that the story was going to take that was limiting in a lot of ways. And, I think it could have been a special 2-hour episode just because of all the little issues that they've touched on in the series thus far that they couldn't touch on in the episode as to how things would be different. There was a great moment where in this version, Daphne has a cochlear implant, so she's not deaf. I mean, she's deaf, but she's been able to hear her whole life because she got it at such a young age that she doesn't talk with a speech impediment. She doesn't identify as deaf, and that alone is such a fascinating thing to think about. But they let it just kind of hang there for a minute, and then they moved on to something else. And I kind of wanted to see more repercussions of that, because there's so much with the show by itself, the show without the alternate universe, I feel has always been Bae's struggle more. Daphne's always been very self-assured and very, able to adapt. Whereas Bae has always had a little bit more problems. She's not been a great student, and she's had identity issues. And when she found out why, it made a little bit more sense. But she could never really explore her family the way she wanted to, because Angela was over here, and then Regina was over. So this was actually a chance to flip it and to see a little bit more of a struggle for Daphne, who had she didn't even realize she had this void. And I don't want to see a show about that alternate reality if it's going to replace the Switch to Birth I know and love. And yet I would watch them both side by side, like sliding doors. Like if they wanted to do the rest of the season or whatever, half an episode this way, I would totally watch that, because it's so fascinating to me. The whole it's a butterfly effect, but it's also the nature nurture again. You know, how much are you who you are because of your genetics, and how much of it is your environment. And if it's your environment with a bias, that's an even greater thing. And in this alternate reality, it really was, because they knew that the girls were switched. They had a bias against Regina, and so they tried not to ever mention her to these girls, and they tried to just ignore it and throw money at the problem and just raise them in as sisters, but never really addressing the adoption issue. And I don't know, it's just fascinating how much the show brings up that you don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, and then you do an episode like that and you're kind of forced to remember all of these little things, whereas most shows, one show would be about adoption, and one show would be about deaf identity, and one show would be about addiction and how it tears apart a family, and this show is doing it all at the same time.
See, where you just said that you wanted to see that as well. I'm thinking of it now, Fringe, with Letters of Transit, where they kind of gave you that glimpse of the future, and you definitely wanted that.
I do, because it's,
and then you end up getting it, but I don't think you'll get it.
No, we're not going to get it. I'm not going to get it,
but
and you don't need it.
Right, but it's a fascinating thing when you kind of give viewers an insight into a world that they didn't know. I know. And
it's not a real world.
Right, of course. But I know you guys would be shocked, but I watched Friends last night, and it was the one that could have been.
Right.
And so I was watching, it was the second part. I was on the local station, and I was like, I could have watched a couple more episodes of this. Chandler and Monica still finding their way to each other, even despite the ridiculousness. Them all kind of ending up, the only thing that kind of wasn't the same in terms of, Endgame, in terms of forgetting the relation, Ross and Rachel were they were both kind of back to pilot stage versus anything else. But it just, it's fascinating when shows do give you that glimpse of what is. Bones has done it.
Yeah.
Castle did it-ish. kind of ish with the blue butterfly. You
Yeah.
know, it's always fascinating when shows do that because, well, it's a fun experiment for sure. It also runs the risk of making the audience go, wait, I kind of want more. Like,
Except the thing is, like, the good thing is that you don't necessarily want more at the expense of, you know, and that's
Right.
the one thing I think they did really well was the whole point was that if they thought their life, if things were getting tough now because they were trying to juggle this blended family and they, you know, lost out on 13 years of these girls' lives, the whole point was we're going to show you that it could have been worse. And it wasn't worst case scenario where like John and Catherine and Regina all lose the children and they go but it was pretty bad. Like every person was, with the exception of Bay, actually, every person was like their worst self. You know, Daphne was this like vapid, like spoiled, using the guilt against her parents. The parents were fighting all the time. It wasn't a happy relationship. They were pulled apart in separate angles. They were that more stereotypical, like, rich family.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. So it shouldn't make you want it at the expense of, because you love the characters the way they are. And the only thing I will say for Bay and Emmett fans, they may be like, oh crap, we would rather this, because in this universe, you know, they're just getting to know each other, and he hasn't, you know, he hasn't cheated on her, and they're supposed to be, maybe that was their way of saying they're supposed to be together because they met anyway. And so I think for those specific fans, it might be a little bit different, but just the fact that they're willing to do episodes like that, and the fact that they can do episodes like that, yeah, I was very, very excited. Very excited. So that was our summer TV. Well, we'll be back with more. Yeah, we have to talk about Under the Dome for sure, because
And probably The Bridge as well.
Yes, I haven't gotten to that yet, but I will. I promise.
Exactly. We have plans and thoughts and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned because we'll be sure to share them.
Bye.
Bye.